the Palo Alto Network's firewall administration and management configuration. This is where our, rubber's going to meet the road, and you and I are going to take this box from an initial setup phase and start to get it where we can actually get in, we can use it, we can really start to administer and manage it. So as we get into things here for our configuration, we'll get into some of the details about the PAN-OS itself, and then it's really all about how do we get things set up. So how do we get to where we can go in and start controlling it and really start to set things up the way that we want to? Because this is what it's all about, right? We want to do something. We want to be able to put this out there and actually get into it and see the nitty-gritty and see the cool things happening. And then, of course, we get into the basic admin configuration stuff that we can set up and make it a little bit more personalized. So as we begin with things, when we start looking at the PAN-OS itself, it is built upon Fedora, which is a version of Linux. So we're going to see a lot of, underlying things, I guess, and a lot of similarities in terms of our file structure and where we're looking at for stuff, but also in terms of the prompt that we have. So we will run into a greater than sign prompt or a pound prompt. So if we've seen this with other vendors, this shouldn't be anything completely novel to us, but what are these going to mean? What different modes do you think that I'm going to be in based on which of these that I'm at? Alright, so this one right here, the greater than sign will be my operational mode, absolutely, and pound sign, that's right, configuration. So there we go. So we've kind of got everything set there. Now, it's kind of fun. We kind of intro here, but there's a current song out talking about them. It's all about the bass, no treble. A fun song, by the way. But in the wonderful world of PAN-OS, it's all about the GUI. And we can't really say no CLI, but we'll say little CLI. Now, interestingly enough, I can do pretty much everything in the CLI, so I could reside there if I wanted. My opinion, that's going to be a longer way to go about doing things. It's not quite as intuitive as what the GUI is, which, believe me, for me, like I said before, is very high praise for the GUI. Normally, I despise GUIs, and they just do too many problematic things. But PAN-OS, Palo Alto, has actually done a good job of putting information out there, usable information, to make it easy for us to really maintain what could be a very complicated system otherwise. So in here, we're going to concentrate on the GUI. Also, that's because what our exams do is concentrate on the GUI for things. A little bit of CLI here and there, but you must absolutely get started with the CLI. Okay, because we do have a couple things we have to set up. Remember, like we said before, out of the box, you have 0 IP address whatsoever. So you got nothing. So in order to get to that GUI, because it is all about the GUI, then we have to go into the CLI. We have to do a little bit of configuration in there in order to make that actually happen. So when we do that, it's all going to be a serial connection. Okay, so 9600 N81, so 9600 baud, no parity, 8 data bits, 1 stop bit, all the fun stuff as far as setting up your serial links on there. And don't forget that at the very beginning, I'm going to have admin as my login. Okay? And what kind of user is that again? That's right, it's a super user. So we've got control of the entire device, including account management and everything, because, well, we're getting started. You kind of need that. So after that, we'll go into the account management or administrative configuration, like we said, and set up some other users and do some other stuff in there. But this gives us our starting point. So with that, let's go ahead and start playing with the real equipment. Alright, so let's go ahead and get some of the base stuff going here. So I've gotten into our, Secure CRT is the program that I use, but regardless, I've got a terminal program up, serial port consoled into our PA200, brand new out of the box, all the fun stuff that goes along with it. Okay, so admin is the username, admin is the password, of course, at this point. And it's going to remind us at this point that we're still configured with the default admin account credentials. So basically, don't leave those there. Security 101. Default passwords and accounts, really not the coolest thing. So once we get in and start to configure stuff, we will also disable, change the password, disable it, do whatever you want to do, but make it unique so that somebody can't just randomly come in and decide what they have going on. Okay. So notice, by the way, that we are at the greater than sign prompt, so we are in an operational mode at this point in time. All right, so everything we can do Certainly, question mark will help us out, see exactly what's going on. We do have set commands that we can do for operational parameters in there, all the cool things. Notice we can do all sorts of other stuff that we will get to in some future nuggets, like TCP dump and then viewing that packet capture. They're very powerful tools that we have here. All right, so let's see what we have with the set command. Right, not a whole lot of things going on. Okay, so I can set CLI properties, some management server if we're going to connect to Panorama at that point, password and stuff along those lines. Now set system on the other hand. Okay, by the way, space or tab will auto-config. So set system setting, really not very helpful in there. Okay, so notice that everything we're getting to is not about configuration. Well, very simply, we are not in configuration mode. So if we want to configure, you type configuration mode, and then we're going to find ourselves at the pound prompt. Okay? So that's going to tell us that we got a whole lot going on there. So again, question mark can let us see where we are, and the set again to kind of set our information. Now we see we got a whole lot more information to it, or a whole lot more things going on. Most importantly, when we get up here and scroll back here a little bit, my device config. Okay, that's going to be the catch as far as where we are. So set device config, and again question mark for it that we have to see where we're at. So I'm going to have system, again question mark. Now we'll see everything that we're going to need to do, or at least give us more than we need to do, but give us options for where we're at. So I'm going to be looking at the IP address. I'm going to be looking at the net mask. And scroll back up here. Whoop. Can't do that. So set device system IP address. Okay, let's type in what we want. 10.10.168/23. Whoop! Invalid syntax. Hate when that happens. And I just need to wake up and remember what device that I'm on. Okay, so unfortunately we can't do that, but we can set the IP address there. Set device config, system, netmask, and it is in dotted decimal format. And then my default gateway. And we should be good on that. Oops. Go ahead and commit. Okay, it's not always helpful, by the way, when you see the cursor jumping around on stuff, but it will give us some dots along the way. Unfortunately, that's kind of a problem with some VT codes and some terminal programs, so your mileage may actually vary on that, but it is what it is. But here's where the dots are coming along, and once that's done, we'll get back, get a new pound prompt on there that we know the commit is finished. At that point in time, we should be able to go into a web browser and actually get to that particular address. So all the cool things that we have. And it does give us a percentage every once in a while, just to remind us that it's still awake. Alright. 99, and I always like how we get to 99% and then it still keeps going for a while. You're like, seriously? I don't believe you about the 99% part, but whatever. There we go. Now we're at 100%. So we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and check out our web browser. Alright, let's go ahead and type that in. This is going to be HTTPS. And page can't be displayed. Where are we at? There we go. Okay, so apparently I am not nearly patient enough for the system to catch up with me, but that does happen every now and then. So continue the website, standard stuff, and at this point in time we'll get our Palo Alto login prompt here, and remember it's still admin at this point. No, I do not need to remember that. Yes, I'm aware that it's a default. Yes, I know I should change that. So it's good that it keeps reminding us about this. So, in case you haven't noticed, it's not a good idea to keep the original credentials. So this is where we kind of get in and start to get to the meat and potatoes of everything that's going to be going on. So we're prompted with our dashboard right here. We have our basic configuration information. It tells me what my utilization happens to be for both the management CPU and data plane CPU. All the fun things going on with it. Obviously, the amounts on here will vary based on what device that we have. But we see right here that we are a PA200. Okay, so very simple stuff. Now, most of what we're going to be getting into and doing will be on the actual device configuration itself, as far as our setup and everything else goes like that. But be aware of each of the different tabs and what kinds of information that they're going to have on here. So the best thing, again, if we can start playing with this, and we'll try to demonstrate a lot of these as we go through various configuration parts and what to look at, especially when we get to monitoring and policies and things like that. But, kind of make sure that we have familiarity with what is going to be where, because again, this is where a lot of things from our exam standpoint are going to come from, both on the ACE, which is more of an operational exam, as well as the CNSE, which is both configuration and operation and design concepts and things like that. So we're going to get a lot of that stuff in there, so definitely kind of pay attention to that. Like I said, our device tab right over here is where we're going to see most of our information. So again, gives us kind of our summary for where we're set up or how we're set up to begin with, and a bunch of information over here that we can actually configure. So when we start out in here, we're going to be on our management setup tab, or at least when I click on device anyway. So this kind of gives me everything as far as management goes. Now, by default, we have a management Ethernet port that we use specifically for management, and that's the only way that we're going to manage it. If we do want to get some other information, we can look on our services tab right here, still all about management, and service route configuration. And instead of using the management interface for all, I can actually customize and choose, like I can do web browser from the inside, or I can do SSH from the inside, or whatever it's going to be on there. But you can customize that information if you want to. We'll get more into details on that in a future nugget. But for right now, our concentration is primarily going to be on our administrator's side of things. Okay, so notice that we have the admin in a super user role on here. Okay, so we can go ahead and go in here and administer it. So type in the old password, which of course is admin by default, and then, whoops, let's go ahead and give it a new password. Okay, make sure they match on there, which is always a good thing, and just go ahead and click OK. So that's going to change the role of that particular one right there. And better yet, because we want to go through and, like I said, accounting is going to be a big thing. So let's go ahead and create a new account on here. Okay, so authentication profile, we can use a drop-down box. There really aren't any right now, so if we get into doing that, more advanced feature and stuff like that, we can. Otherwise, just choose none for the moment. And go ahead and put a password here as well. Okay, so nice required field. And the roles. So remember about the roles that we had: super user read-only, device administrator, or device administrator read-only. There is also a vSys and a vSys read-only as well on larger boxes. On the smaller boxes like PA200, you're not allowed to create more than one virtual system, so basically it's your device itself. So that kind of limits us. That's why those roles don't exist on there. So no, I didn't lie to you before. Those are still built-in accounts, but the smaller boxes aren't going to have that information. Okay. So in the same type of thing, if we got password profiles, we can go ahead and set that up, but we don't have anything right now. So kind of keep that information in there, go ahead and click OK, and now I should end up where I have my second user. Now, again, like I said about everything that I'm doing on here, if I was going to log out and try to log back in, it wouldn't work as the SW Morris account because it hasn't been committed. So everything that I've done on here, all my changes, my admin change password, didn't happen. My creation of the new account didn't happen until I go up here to the top right and go ahead and click on commit. So I want to make sure that I have all the information for it, and we'll poke around kind of a little bit. Well, now I guess we'll go ahead and commit this. We can do that as we go. Okay, yep, commit, overwrite the running configuration, always cool. You can preview changes. This is always a good way to kind of check things on here. Again, especially if we're in a multiple administrator standpoint, that you want to see exactly what's been going on. But it's just me. Nobody else is getting in here. If they are, I'm going to have to smack somebody. But at that point in time, go ahead and say OK, and we'll wait a minute or so and let it all commit. Alright, so we're good to go on that. That actually took a little bit less than a minute, so just kind of so we know what kind of timing to expect and things like that on there. Again, we'll go through a lot of the specifics and the configuration here in later nuggets, but one of the other things I want to get to right now is my software and my licenses and my updates. Okay? So this is where we start to do things as far as communications with the outside world. So if we've set things up, whether we have an external firewall or any external routing devices that we need to set, or NAT or things along those lines, in order to get software, in order to get licenses, in order to get the updates, we have to communicate with the outside world. Yeah, okay, small things. So, let's see, we are on device, I'm going to go back up here, setup. Management. And let's see, where do we have this? So services, here we go. Okay, so one of the important things, by the way, is you kind of need to set up DNS if we're going to be reaching things by name. So we might want to edit that part on there. We can just use some of the global ones. Going to keep things simple. I don't necessarily need an NTP server, but you know what the heck, we can get that. Okay, so cool. Don't need a proxy or anything else like that, so let's just go ahead and hit OK, and then commit the information. Yep, I know it'll do that. Okay. So once we're done with this, so a minute or so later, now we can go through and take a look at our software settings and important stuff like that. Okay, so since I committed on that, keep in mind that our credentials weren't valid anymore, so that's why it went ahead and kicked me out. So I can log in with my special ones now. Nope, still don't want to remember that. Alright, so create my sessions, see what we have going on here. And now we can log back in, all the fun stuff that we have. Okay, device. And scroll down, and now let's see if we can go to software. Still no updated information available. Okay, we're going to have to check this one out on my firewall. Alright, so that may have been my bad. So let's check this out here. Set up services. Okay, so we are reading everything cool. Yeah, I had entries to put on my firewall, in my lab firewall anyway, make sure that I'm not letting things out. So now let's see. So, let it check. Let it go ahead and do its update. There we go. Now this is what I expected to see. So the operation failed part, but we have all the information on here. It tells me what software versions are available on the system. We're at a 6.02 right now. 6.03 actually was downloaded on this system, so we could go ahead and install that, or I can download and go through updates and stuff. We'll cover how to do that in a later nugget. Really not that difficult. Other things that we want to look at is our licenses. Right. So license management, just retrieve keys from the license server, kind of the easiest way to do things, as long as we have connectivity on there. If we don't, we can go ahead and manually add the stuff, but this tells me exactly what I have going on. So right now I've got a 2-year license pretty much on everything, well, I guess a year and a half, but anyway, until June of 2016, I have availability of all of the information on here. So when we go to dynamic updates, that's going to be kind of my catchy part as far as what kind of content there is. I'll go ahead and do a check now just to refresh everything on here. But this will see what it is that we have, where we're at, what was recently downloaded, if anything on there, anything that I may need to check or may need to add, and go ahead and tell it to download if that's something that I want to do. So since we're here anyway, we'll just go ahead and kind of tell it to do that. But that's the extent of my initial setup and management. So we got our IP address up and going, our gateway, our netmask, Had to remember to do our DNS servers, which was very important to reach everything by name, and then go ahead and just verify everything else that we have on here. So kind of good stuff to go through, good stuff to check out. And next, of course, we'll go ahead and see how this works in the VM environment. Alright, so we've covered the physical side of things. Now we really have the same basic features for our device setup and admin configuration to do on the VM. Now, one of the things, of course, to begin with is an OVA file. That's going to be what is going to actually install the VM100 or whichever version of the VM that we're going to be using on there onto our ESXi host, onto a VMware NSX host, onto the Citrix SDX, or onto the Linux KVM. Okay, so those are the 4 hypervisors that we have to be able to play with, and our file names will vary depending on which version we use, but that's where we're going to install our VMs. I happen to have an ESXi, so that's going to be my demonstration for it. Now, these are not, you can get free trials, but they are not is directly available off the website. Okay, so you do have to have a login onto Palo Alto, and you will have to request from the sales team to be able to do a demo. I would highly suggest doing that. They are free for doing the demos. I would highly suggest doing that for playing around and wanting to kind of get familiar with this stuff and set it up. Usually when we test in live environments, our bosses aren't particularly amused when we go ahead and play around with things, so definitely want to set up a VM, definitely want to go ahead and play around with it as much as we can in order to learn for our exams and for our future configurations and stuff. So good things to kind of take a look at. So the OVA file that we're going to get, I went ahead and downloaded the latest version, so it'll be on 6.1 already. We'll go through the software update later on to get it up to 6.1. I've got various, I've got 2 different PA200s at 2 different levels, so we'll kind of see how some of that goes. So, but that gives us the extent of where we're at right now. The OVA, by the way, is about a 1.3 gig file, so it is not small. Do be aware of that if you're downloading stuff, that it will take some time to do that. So let's go ahead and get into our vSphere and see how we can make things work. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started on here. We are going to, well, you can't quite see it on the screen, but file and deploy OVF template. So that's going to give us where we're going to be at and pick what file I want to use. So let's see, where am I going from here? Downloads. There we go. Palo Alto VM, all the cool stuff that we have. So let's go ahead and install it. Sure. Okay, we'll do a thin provision on here as well. Basically, I don't want to take up all my disk space for stuff. Normally, what they kind of ask for is going to be having 2 CPUs as a minimum, 2 network cards as a minimum, 4 gig RAM, and 40 gig for a hard drive. So I don't quite want to use all that information in there. So we'll go ahead and provision it thinly, kind of a little festive word there. Bring this in, and basically we'll let it go ahead and upload and take its time for it. So cool things, a little bit less than 10 minutes there to actually get everything up and going. So now we can take a look at it. See our device right here. Okay, we are not powered on right now. So let's go ahead and power this bad boy on and take a look at our console. And we should see everything start to boot up. Okay, this is going to be just like watching a physical device. I know we didn't get a chance to do that so far, but just in case we needed to get into it, everything pretty much is, well, exactly the same. We're just virtualizing it. Okay, so we get to watch the Unix version. Remember, this is a Fedora core. Okay, so we get to watch the Linux stuff come up here and kind of take a look at where we're going for it. And there we go. Perfect VM login. Admin. Yep. Click on this. Admin. Oh, we haven't waited for it to initialize yet. Duh. Okay, so one of the things with any of the Palo Altos, and sorry I didn't mention it ahead of time, kind of dawned on me a little bit late, is that there are different modes through boot up, and until you actually see the PA VM, in this case, or the PA 200 or PA whatever the model number is, that's the actual final login where the account table is actually available. Any previous logins are done for various maintenance modes. There's actually 3 different login types in there that I talk about during a password recovery nugget that we'll do a little bit later. But the final one is what we have to wait for. In other words, you got to be a little bit patient. As we've discussed, not really one of my virtues. So, that being said, now that we've logged in, we are actually in the VM. We will notice that we're in operational mode, that I can do, my question mark and stuff like that pretty much exactly the same as I've had before, so really shouldn't be any difference for things. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into configure mode and do what we did before. Interestingly enough, by the way, let me exit back out. I can type conf and hit enter, it won't take it, but if I hit conf and space, it will auto-complete it and then it will take it. So that is kind of an interesting feature about their shortcuts, is it will auto-complete, but hitting enter does not magically make that happen in there. So set device config, system, IP address, and then something that we have available, netmask, and then our gateway. Okay, and of course commit, and we should be good to go. So this, in theory, will happen a whole lot faster than what it did on the physical device there. Yep, 75% already. So always a good thing, VM's nice and quick for this information. And we have that, so we can go ahead and go out and should be able to go to our website. Alright, so go ahead and click on that, and of course gives us the same thing. Let it continue, tell us everything's perfectly cool, and we should be able to log in here. So admin, not particularly interested, yes I know that. Again, all the good reminders of everything. And brings up our dashboard and tells us exactly where we're at. So notice my device type right here is going to be PAVM, so it tells me all the same stuff, everything that I've had before as far as where I'm at, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about. So those are our basic sets of information on there for getting into a VM. Now, a couple limitations, by the way, at least as far as our VMs go. We have some limitations for high availability. Okay, actually let me go back and we'll kind of write these down. Okay, so little things that we will find, we have some limits of VM. So my HA, my high availability stuff, is set to active passive only. So I can't have an active set going on there. I do have a limit of 10 interfaces. And that's actually a VM limitation. Okay, so you can't get too fancy in there. Remember, we can deploy multiple versions of the virtual machine, so we can kind of get beyond that 10 interface limit, but 10 interfaces per single device at that point. There is no vSys. So basically, if you want virtual systems, deploy a separate VM for each one, kind of redundant otherwise. vMotion also is going to be a problem on your VMware stuff. So vMotion is not allowed. So a little bit of restriction in there. Let's see what else. We also have jumbo frames are not supported. So I'll say equal no on there. And then the other things, if we're going to do lag, so lag itself is on the VM. Okay, so my VM device, my ESXi for that matter, would have to set up the lag information and then give a single interface to the virtual machine. So it's not like the virtual machine would have multiple interfaces and then aggregate them. I suppose that actually makes it easier because that way I do the lag on the VM and it kind of goes with my limit of 10 interfaces. So it makes it a little bit simpler for me if I have to get into that sort of high bandwidth or high excuse me, high usage type scenario. So at least good things, not too bad. But those are the limits as far as what my VM goes. I do have multiple models of my VM available that we discussed before. There are going to be limits on number of sessions and things like that, and it's all derived by what my license happens to be. So get that fun stuff set up. If you don't have a license, so if you are purely in a trial environment and they didn't give you a trial license, you're going to be an unlicensed server will be limited to 200 connections. So that can be, well, reached pretty fast. If all you're doing is looking at it from going through and testing out your menus and remembering where things are and playing around in configuration, so basically making it not operational, I think that this is perfectly cool because you're not going to have real traffic going through it. But if you are labbing it in a test lab environment where you want real traffic, 200 licenses will be pretty quick to come by. Okay, so kind of bear that in mind for study versus production lab. But otherwise, that is my virtual machine. So we got to do our basic setup here, really our initial device install. And that was for both the physical and my VM environment. So those are really kind of our good things as far as how we get started, what those basics happen to be in there. And then from there, we kind of got into looking at stuff with the software, with my licenses, with my updates a little bit, and really kind of concluded with the administration portion. So admin accounts. So that kind of gets me to where I'm started, to where I really need to be, whether I'm doing my physical or virtual setup, in order to get us moving into the next sets of nuggets. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.
Because I'm all about that bass, no trouble.